I have 30 seconds before the man who controls half of Los Angeles realizes my daughters are kneeling at his dead son's grave. I count them from behind the eucalyptus tree. 30 yards away, car keys already in my fist, the October afternoon pressing down in that particular LA way, warm and orange and indifferent to catastrophe. 3 black SUVs on the hill road, 4 men in charcoal suits moving through the headstones in a diamond formation. Footfalls silent over the damp grass, their eyes doing the sweeping, continuous inventory of men trained to treat every open space as a potential kill zone. And at the center of the diamond, unhurried as someone who hasn't needed to hurry in years, Shin Dae-ho, chairman of Shin Pacific Trading, collector of debts, architect of grief. He visits every October 14th. I know because I've studied him the way I once studied balance sheets, obsessively from a careful distance, looking for the single line that doesn't reconcile. I came at 3 in the afternoon. He always comes at 10. Mia's voice carries across 30 yards of damp grass and chrysanthemum smell and hillside silence. "Daddy, we brought white ones this time, like Mommy said you liked best." Sua sets her flowers against the headstone, both small hands pressing the stems into the earth, careful as a surgeon. Shin Dae-ho stops walking. Every one of his 4 bodyguards stops with him. The whole diamond freezes, all except one. The man on the far left doesn't stop with the others. He hesitates a half second too long, then raises his phone. Not to call in a perimeter check, to take a photo. I notice that. I file it. I keep counting. 15 seconds. The boss takes 1 step forward toward 2 small girls in burgundy coats who don't know enough to be afraid of him yet. And I watch his face do something I've only read about in the police psychologist's report that was never made public. The complete involuntary collapse of a man's defenses when he encounters something he has no category for. 10 seconds. If you were standing 30 feet from the man who could dismantle your life, carrying evidence that would dismantle his, and your 5-year-old daughters just called his dead son Daddy in front of his entire security detail, what would you do? I had exactly 8 seconds before he turned around. I made the wrong choice, the right one. I still can't tell the difference. This is how I got here. Korean Mafia boss finds twin girls, placing flowers at son's grave. Their mother's secret. Breaks him. 3 years ago, I was the woman nobody remembered. That's not self-pity. It was professional strategy. I spent 7 years as a forensic accountant at a downtown LA firm, the kind of practice that contracted to law firms, the IRS, and occasionally the DEA when federal agents needed someone who could read a falsified ledger the way a cardiologist reads an irregular heartbeat, quickly, accurately, and with the understanding that the irregularity is trying to kill somebody. I was good at it because I was invisible. In a room full of lawyers and executives and agency men arguing about whose names were on the documents, nobody tracked the quiet black woman in the corner who was identifying those documents as forgeries. Jaewon said that was my superpower. You disappear when you need to and see everything while you're gone. He was right. He just didn't know how long I'd need to use it. I met him at a routine audit. The client was Shin Pacific Trading's media subsidiary, a legitimate enough entertainment licensing firm that happened to share a parent company with an organization that was considerably less legitimate. I didn't know that part yet. What I knew was that the media division's CFO was unavailable and had sent his junior director to supervise my team's access to the financial records. The junior director arrived 40 minutes late, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the building's lobby cart, and set one on my desk without asking whether I wanted it. I looked up. He was in his mid-20s, sharply dressed, with the slightly distracted focus of a man managing 3 problems simultaneously. He looked at my desk. The flagged invoices, the color-coded cross-reference binders, the meticulous analog backup of every digital file, and said very quietly, "You're good." Not a question. An observation. The same kind I made. I said thank you and went back to work. He asked me to dinner 3 weeks later. I said no twice because you don't date clients, and yes the third time because he brought coffee again and quoted a discrepancy I'd buried in footnote 6 of a 60-page preliminary report and grinned when I looked surprised. Nobody reads footnote 6. Jae-won read footnote 6. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday. He died on a Wednesday. The police report said single vehicle accident, loss of control on the curve of Mulholland at 11:47 p.m. No other vehicles, no witnesses, alcohol suspected. The toxicology report that the LAPD filed listed a blood alcohol concentration of 0.16. Jae-won didn't drink, not a drop. Not in 5 years of sobriety after watching his mother die of cirrhosis when he was 22. I'd never seen him touch anything harder than barley tea. I held that toxicology report in my hands in the hospital waiting room where they told me he was gone, and I thought, someone typed that number. I spent the next 6 months building a file instead of a nursery. I was 8 months pregnant with twin girls by the time I understood what Jae-won had been afraid of, and I delivered Mia and Soo-ah into a world where I knew their grandfather ran the organization that had most likely killed their father, and I couldn't prove which member of that organization had pulled the trigger. So I did the only thing that made sense. I hid. I moved to Culver City. I freelanced under my maiden name. I took on clients far enough from Shin Pacific Trading's orbit that no one would connect the dots. I raised 2 girls who have their father's dark eyes and his particular habit of tilting their heads when something interests them, and every October 14th I drove them to Forest Lawn, let them place white chrysanthemums, Jae-won had told me once laughing that his grandmother grew them, and told them their daddy loved them and was watching. The ritual of it kept me honest. On ordinary Tuesday mornings when I was tired and the girls had been difficult and the loneliness had weight, the ritual reminded me what the careful, shadowless life was for. I dressed them in their matching coats, burgundy because it was Jae-won's favorite color on me, a small private continuity, and drive up the hill and watch them place their flowers and think, this is why the math has to stay clean. Because they deserve to know who their father was someday when it's safe enough to know. I timed the cemetery visits carefully. Shin Dae-ho came at 10 in the morning. I came at 3. For 4 years, the math worked. This October, something changed in his schedule. I don't know if grief reshapes the hours you keep or if it was something else entirely. What I know is that at 3:17 p.m. on October 14th, his SUVs appeared on the hill road while my daughters were still at the grave, and the calculation I'd kept clean for 4 years became catastrophically unsolvable. I step out from behind the eucalyptus tree. No choice. There is no version of this where I let him speak to them alone. The distance between us closes in slow motion. I count details the way I always count them when my body is screaming run and my brain is screaming information first. Shin Dae-ho is 61, built like a man who spent his 40s in rooms where the wrong answer cost you more than the argument. His suit is dark wool, his hair silver at the temples, his face the particular kind of still that very powerful and very grief-stricken people learn to maintain, because any visible emotion is a liability. He's looking at my daughters, at Soo-ah specifically. She looks exactly like Jae-won. I've always known it. Same jaw, same eyes set slightly farther apart than expected. Same way of going very quiet when something matters. At 5 years old, she already has his composure, and I have spent 5 years grateful for it and terrified by it. Because composure that specific is genetic, and genetics can be recognized. He recognizes it now. I watch it happen. The way his stillness changes quality, from controlled to shattered, from 20 feet away, and I close the remaining distance before his security detail can make the decision to stop me. Mia, Soo-ah. My voice is even. I've practiced even for 5 years. Come to mommy. They turn. Mia runs. Soo-ah holds her position for 1 more second. She's always been the one who finishes what she's doing. then straightens and looks at the large, still man standing over her and does something that stops my heart. She holds out the last white chrysanthemum. "You can have one," she says. "He's your person too, right? You smell like him." The boss doesn't move for a long moment. His jaw works once, tightly. Then he takes the flower from her hand with the kind of careful deliberateness you use when you're afraid of breaking something irreplaceable. "Gamsahamnida," he says softly. "Thank you." And then he looks up at me. I've studied his face in photographs for 4 years. Newspapers, surveillance reports obtained through channels I'm not going to specify, the occasional grainy social media image from Koreatown events he attended as a legitimate businessman. I thought I knew that face. I was wrong. Photographs don't capture the intelligence in it, the surgical speed of his assessment. He looks at me for approximately 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds I can see him cataloging everything. My age, my profession by the calluses on my hands, and the particular flatness of my affect, the way I'm positioned between him and my daughters, and the fact that I came toward him instead of away. "You knew him," he says. Not a question. "Yes." He looks at Sue-ah, back at me. One word. "How long?" And this is the moment I've rehearsed for 4 years and still haven't prepared for, because the answer is long enough for him to love us, and the consequence of saying that out loud here, with 3 of his men within earshot and one of them on his phone, that bodyguard who isn't watching the perimeter, who hasn't watched the perimeter once since they arrived, whose eyes keep moving between the boss's face and his screen. "Sajangnim," says the man with the phone, stepping forward. "We should... Gaja." The boss raises one hand without looking at him. The command is quiet. It lands like a door closing. His men step back in unison. He doesn't look away from me. "But not you. The 3 of you will come with us." It isn't a threat. It isn't a request either. I look at my daughters. Mia is pressed to my left hip, watching everything with those too perceptive 5-year-old eyes. Sua is still looking at the man who took her flower, not afraid, curious, her father's composure and her father's terrible instinct for recognizing safety in unlikely places. I think about the file on my laptop, the encrypted drive, the 4 years of evidence I've assembled like a mosaic, tile by careful tile, waiting until I had enough pieces to see the whole picture without getting killed when I showed it to anyone. I think about that bodyguard's phone. "All right," I say, "we'll come." The restaurant is called Hanam, and it occupies the 2nd floor of a building on 6th Street that appears, from the outside, to be an upscale Korean barbecue establishment serving the Koreatown lunch crowd. The 1st floor is exactly that. The smell of doenjang and sesame oil follows us up the stairs. Comforting and incongruous, the smell of ordinary life 2 floors below whatever this room is. The 2nd floor is something else entirely. Private dining rooms with no windows facing the street. Security protocols I count as we pass through them. 4 checkpoints, 2 cameras per corridor, a man at the stairs who gives the boss a micro bow and the rest of us nothing. And a hierarchy of deference so precisely calibrated that I can map the organization's structure by watching who pours whose drink. The youngest man in the room pours for everyone else, fills glasses from the left, 2-handed, with a slight forward bend at the waist. The man who poured for the man to the boss's right waited until he received a small nod. The man who moved toward the boss didn't pour at all. Someone stepped in smoothly and took the bottle from his hands before he could, the way a relay runner takes a baton, and poured for the boss with both hands and a deeper bow. Nobody told them to do any of this. It was simply the grammar of the room. The man with the phone from the cemetery, Park Sung-jin, I gather his name from the way a younger man addresses him when asking about seating, takes the chair 2 places to the boss's right, not behind him, beside him. It's a subtle displacement, a fraction outside the perimeter a pure security chief would maintain, and in that fraction, I read 12 years of accumulated trust reshaping the geometry of who sits where. I sit across from Daeho. The girls are at a table near the door with Mrs. O, who appeared without announcement and is discussing the merits of various pancake toppings with Sua in a tone of complete professional seriousness. The boss arranged this without speaking. A glance toward Mrs. O, a small nod, and it was done. The room empties to a respectful distance. We are alone in the way powerful people are alone, surrounded and unobserved. "What was your name to him?" he asks. "Simone Carter." I fold my hands on the table. My inventory runs continuously, a second brain operating parallel to the conversation. The scar below his right ear, blade, old, a decade at minimum. The stiffness in his left hand, old fracture, imperfectly healed, the kind of injury a man carries without complaint. The grief that has become architecture, not fresh wound, but structural load-bearing, something he has organized his entire rebuilt self around. We met when I was contracted to audit one of your subsidiary companies, Shin Pacific's media division. Jay Wan ran it. I know what Jay Wan ran. He was careful about keeping me separate from everything else. I didn't know. I want you to understand this. I didn't know for certain what the larger organization was until after he died. I hold his gaze. He was trying to protect me. Something moves across his features. Not softness exactly, recognition. The specific recognition of a man who has heard this behavior described before, because he raised the boy who did it. "He would," he says quietly. Then, the girls. Yes, he knew. We found out together, 8 weeks before he died. The cedarwood smell sharpens as the air conditioning shifts. Outside, the Koreatown evening continues. Cars, bass from a club 2 blocks south, someone's laughter on the street below. In here, it is perfectly quiet in a way that costs money to achieve and longer than money to maintain. "Why didn't you tell me?" It isn't a question. It's the kind of sentence a man says when he already knows the answer will cost him. I give him the safe answer first. "I didn't know how you'd respond. A woman you'd never met claiming to carry your son's children. The organization's scrutiny. I was afraid." "And the expensive answer?" I pause. He's sharper than I gave him credit for, which is saying something given that I gave him considerable credit. "I wasn't sure," I say carefully, "that the person responsible for Jaewon's death was outside your organization." The quality of his stillness changes, different from the graveyard. That was shattering. This is consolidation, a man pulling every scattered piece of himself back into a single, contained point. Say that again. Jaewon didn't lose control of his car on Mulholland Drive. He was a careful driver. He didn't drink, and the route he was on that night wasn't on his way home from anywhere he'd told me he was going. I keep my voice level. He'd found financial irregularities in the organization. He was scared. He told me he didn't know who to bring it to because he didn't know how far up it went, and then he died. Shin Dae-ho sets the chrysanthemum on the table between us. "How long have you known this?" "I've suspected it since the night of his accident. I've had documented evidence for 14 months. I don't blink. I was waiting until I had enough to be bulletproof, because whoever did it is still close to you, and I needed to be sure that when I showed you what I have, you'd act on it rather than bury it." He looks at me for a long time. I watch Park Sung-jin, 2 tables away, watching us. "You came to the grave every year," Dae-ho says finally. "Yes, knowing I might find you. You came at 10 in the morning. I came at 3. The corner of his mouth moves. Not a smile, not yet. Something harder. Respect, perhaps, or its forensic accounting equivalent. Acknowledgement that the math checks out. If you've ever calculated, almost perfectly, the distance between a secret and a revelation, and then watched one small child with a flower close that distance in 10 seconds flat, you understand exactly where I was sitting. He doesn't let us go back to my apartment. He frames it as a question. Will you accept a safe house while we discuss this properly? But the framing is courtesy. The offer is architecture. We are already inside his protection, and dismantling it would require a negotiation I don't have the leverage to win tonight. Not with Mia half asleep on Mrs. O's shoulder and Sua asking Park Sung-jin with absolute 5-year-old seriousness why he keeps looking at her. I notice Park's expression when she says that. The smile he produces is perfectly calibrated. Warm, avuncular, the exact warmth of a man who has spent years managing impressions, but his right thumb moves against his index finger 3 times in quick succession before he controls it. A self-soothing tic, a stress response, the kind you develop when your body has learned to fear a specific category of discovery. Why is Park Sung-jin stressed by a question from a 5-year-old? I file it. I keep filing. The safe house is in Silver Lake, a renovated bungalow behind a wall of birds of paradise that could pass for a private rental to any neighbor who looked. Clean, stocked. A woman I don't learn the name of brings clothes in our sizes within 2 hours of arrival, which tells me either the boss keeps supplies for variable guests or someone made calls while I was watching the road. Mia and Sua fall asleep in the same bed, the way they always do, arms wrapped around each other like they're still sharing a womb. I stand in the doorway and watch them and feel the specific, shattering tenderness of a mother who has made choices she cannot take back on behalf of people who trusted her without knowing there was anything to trust. Mia's lashes are long and still. Sua's face in sleep loses the careful composure she wears awake. She looks younger, softer, more visibly 5, more visibly J1. I let myself feel it for exactly 60 seconds. Then I go back to the kitchen and open my laptop. The boss arrives at 9 p.m. He comes with 2 men. Park Sung-jin is not one of them. I note this. He either trusts Park and left him elsewhere for operational reasons, or he's separating variables. I don't know which yet. He puts a glass of barley tea in front of me without being asked. I don't ask how he knew. He waits until I drink. "Tell me about Jae-won's last months," he says. "Not the investigation. Him. What was he like?" It isn't what I expected. I'd prepared for tactical questions, timelines, evidence specifics, the financial irregularities. Not this, I tell him. I tell him that Jae-won laughed at things that most people considered too small to notice. A particularly good parking spot, a cloud shaped like a duck, Mia's habit of narrating everything she observed out loud. I tell him that Jae-won cooked on Sunday mornings with the focused intensity of someone diffusing a bomb, and the results were always either transcendent or inedible, never middling. I tell him he was afraid in those last months, but he didn't stop being himself. Afraid and present at the same time, the same way you can be running and still notice the sky. Shin Dae-ho listens with his hands flat on the table and his eyes somewhere slightly past me, and I watch grief do what it does to a face when someone gives it new material. Specific, irreplaceable, the kind of material photographs and eulogies never provide. "He never told me," he says finally. "The irregularities, whatever he found. He told me he didn't know who to trust." He closes his eyes for exactly 3 seconds, opens them. He thought it might reach me. I don't know what he thought. I think he was trying to protect you. He would. The same weight as before. Father and son, mirror images, both spending themselves protecting everyone except themselves. The kitchen is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the Silver Lake neighborhood settling into night. He's close enough that I can smell cold tea and something else, wool and cedar, and the particular antiseptic undertone of a man who has been in uncomfortable rooms today and hasn't had time to shed them. He isn't looking at me the way powerful men usually look at women they've decided matter to them. He's looking at me the way a person looks at someone they're still deciding the weight of. I should maintain distance. I know this. But I tell him instead about the night I realized I was in love with his son. A Tuesday in February when Jae-won found me crying over a client's falsified depreciation schedule, not out of professional distress, but out of genuine, irrational grief for the tree the client had demolished in 2019 and backdated to 2017 for tax purposes. And instead of finding this ridiculous, Jae-won sat down next to me and said with complete seriousness, "Tell me about the tree." The boss is quiet for a moment. Then very quietly, "He was 4 years old the first time he cried over a dead bird. I told him to stop. I thought I was teaching him strength." A pause that holds the weight of 26 years of parenting. I was wrong about what strength looked like. I reach across the table and put my hand over his. Not strategy, not calculation. The knowledge that this man has been carrying this wrongness for 5 years with nobody to name it for him, and the tree deserved better than silence. He looks down at my hand, doesn't move. "What have you named them?" he asks. "Mia and Sua." The hairline fracture. His breath catches, barely, just a half-second suspension, the kind a man allows himself in the dark when no one strategic is watching. Jae-won's mother's name had been Sue-mi. He knows I know this because Jae-won told me, and now he knows that Jae-won told me. "He wanted you to know about them," Daeho says. "He wanted you to know too. He just ran out of time." A long silence stretches between us. He doesn't fill it. That, more than anything, tells me something about who he is. A man who understands that silence is its own form of respect, that not every grief needs to be talked past. "He was going to tell me," he says finally. After he resolved whatever he'd found, he always had to resolve things before he could ask for help. His jaw tightens once. He got that from me. The next morning, I get to work. The boss has given me access to 6 months of Shin Pacific Trading's internal financial records. Not blind trust, but tested pragmatism. He wants my professional eyes on a discrepancy in the port logistics, invoicing his internal accountant flagged 3 weeks ago. He thinks it's error. He wants it resolved before his quarterly meeting with his legal team. He doesn't know what I'm actually going to find underneath it. I set up at the kitchen table at 5:30 a.m. with my laptop, the records, and 3 years of my own encrypted files pulled from a cloud backup I've never accessed from a device on my home network. The girls are still asleep. The safe house breathes quietly around me. This is where the fear quiets. When there's a balance sheet to read, when numbers become a language that liars can never speak without an accent. The pattern reveals itself in layers, the way all financial deception does, innocuous on the surface, structural underneath. The invoicing discrepancy the internal accountant caught is the top of the iceberg. Below it, 2 subsidiary accounts drawing from the logistics division budget for vendor payments that, when I trace the vendor registration numbers, lead to shell companies incorporated in the Cayman Islands in 2019 and 2020. The Cayman entities receive the payments, retain approximately 23%, and forward the remainder to a holding company in Singapore. I know that Singapore company. I've seen it before, in Jae-won's files, the ones he pressed into my hand on a thumb drive 2 weeks before he died, at 6 in the morning, with the particular look of a man handing over something he's afraid to hold any longer. "Keep this somewhere they can't find," he said. "I hope you never need it. I need to know it exists somewhere safe." I kept it. I built on it. I spent 14 months constructing the structure he'd glimpsed and died trying to show someone. I cross-reference for 4 hours. I photograph the screen with my phone, add the images to an encrypted album with a time-locked release protocol I set 18 months ago. By 9 a.m., I have what I've been building toward. The authorization signatures on the Cayman wire transfers appear on 73 documents spanning 3 years. The signatory code belongs to one of 17 people with second-level financial authority in Shin Pacific's logistics division. Park Sung-jin is one of those 17. His signature appears on 61 of the 73. The remaining 12 are forgeries. polished ones, prepared by someone intimately familiar with the organization's internal signature verification protocols, the kind of familiarity you develop in 12 years at the right hand of a man who trusts you completely. I'm still sitting with the weight of this when Park Sung-jin appears in the kitchen doorway at 9:15. "Jo Sung-hamnida," he says pleasantly. Apologies for interrupting. The Sejongnim asks if you need anything. He's smiling. It's a thorough smile, constructed, maintained, load-bearing, every component calculated for a specific impression. I've seen this quality of smile before in forensic interviews with people who have spent years being the most trusted person in a room and understand that the only way to hold that position is to make everyone in the room feel they are uniquely seen. I fold my hands on the table, laptop closed, phone in my pocket, face professionally neutral. "I'm fine," I say. "Tell him thank you." He doesn't leave. He takes half a step into the kitchen, hands in his pockets, gaze moving across the table with the particular casualness of a man checking for things he hopes not to find. "Jaewon's death was terrible," he says. "A tragedy. I was with the Sejongnim when we got the call." He shakes his head slowly. "Mulholland at midnight. The curve on the east side. I still think about it." The curve on the east side. The LAPD report documented the accident location as the western approach to the Mulholland-Laurel Canyon intersection. I have the report memorized, every word of every paragraph. The eastern curve is 3/4 of a mile further along the road. Different configuration, different sightline, different physical geometry. You only know which curve from the inside of an event, not from a phone call received afterward. Park Sung-jin knows where Jaewon's car went over because he was there, not at the moment the call came in, before. "I still think about it too," I say. His smile doesn't shift, not 1 millimeter. He's very good. "The Sejongnim values your expertise," he says. "It's good that you're here." His eyes say the rest. "I know what you're looking for. I know how close you are. And I have 12 years to understand how people who matter to Shin Dae-ho can disappear when they become inconvenient." He leaves. I wait 60 seconds. Then I text the single word Dae-ho, and I agreed on the night before, when I'd been careful without explaining why, ready. He arrives within 10 minutes, alone. I place the phone on the table between us and talk for 20 minutes without stopping. The financial trail, the shell companies, the Singapore holding fund connecting to 3 documented Zhong Organization financial entities, the wire transfer authorizations, Park's signature on 61 of 73 documents, and then Jaewon's original files, the thumb drive contents, preserved and built upon, with handwritten margin notes in Jaewon's hand, careful and slightly tilted, the same tilt I see in Sua's letters when she writes her own name for the first time, and the location discrepancy, the eastern curve versus the western approach, the detail that lives in no public record, in no police report, in nothing Park Sung-jin could have read or heard secondhand. Shin Dae-ho reads everything twice. He asks 2 questions, both procedural, about the integrity of my documentation chain. When I finish, he sets the phone down and looks at the ceiling. The silence has texture, the kind that precedes fault lines shifting. 12 years, he says. Yes. He sat at my table. He ate in my house. He closes his eyes. Jaewon trusted him. He called him Hyungnim. I say nothing. This is grief's second wave, bigger than the first, arriving now with the specific devastation of intentionality. His son wasn't taken by accident or carelessness. His son was taken by calculation, by someone who studied the organization's vulnerabilities from the inside, who understood exactly what Jaewon's death would cost and chose it anyway. Mia and Sue-ah, he says. Where are they now? With Mrs. O in the back room. He nods once, opens his eyes. They're dry. He conducts grief internally as a private matter, but they hold something I've only seen once before in a forensic interview with a witness who'd realized the crime wasn't random. The specific, devastating knowledge that someone you loved was taken on purpose by someone they trusted. I pay my debts, he says quietly. I protect what is mine. Betrayal is death. This I have always made clear. A pause. Mia and Sua are mine. You are mine by extension and by Jaewon's choice. This means something in my world, something permanent. I understand, I say. Good. He stands. Stay in this room. Keep the girls with Mrs. O. In approximately 2 hours, you may hear things. He walks out. I hear things in approximately 90 minutes. Not from inside the house. The walls are professionally dampened, but from the quality of the silence around it, which changes temperature. Security repositions. Footsteps at intervals I haven't heard before. Mrs. O comes to me without being asked, and her face holds the practiced calm of a woman who has navigated these specific silences before and has learned that usefulness is its own form of safety. She takes the girls to the innermost room. I stay. I know what's happening. What I didn't account for is Park Sung-jin's contingency planning. The knock at the kitchen door comes at 11:47 p.m., the precise time of the accident on Mulholland Drive, 5 years ago. He wants me to know he knows I know. The precision is deliberate. A message threaded inside a message, delivered in the currency of the thing he took. I open the door because the alternative is letting him knock until someone inside panics. He's alone, or appears to be. Behind him, Silver Lake breathes its ordinary night. Birds of paradise, orange-scented air, the distant audio of the freeway. The Sajangnam has made his decision, Park says. The infrastructure smile is gone. What's underneath it is harder and cleaner and, in its way, more honest. I want you to understand something before the next hour concludes. You've built a very thorough case, thorough enough to matter. I know, but you don't know what I have. One measured step forward. I've been operational within this organization for 12 years. I know where every body is buried. I know every arrangement the Sajangnam has made that cannot survive legal scrutiny. I have documented insurance. If I go down, the entire organization goes with me. His head tilts. You've destroyed Jaewon's killer. You've also destroyed Jaewon's daughter's grandfather. Is that what you came here for? He's calculating my emotional response, banking on maternal fear overriding everything else. He studied this particular man's loyalties for 12 years, and he thinks he understands mine because he thinks mine are similar, rooted in attachment, vulnerable to leverage. He doesn't understand mine, because mine are forensic. You don't have insurance, I say. A beat. The 3 Cayman shell companies. I traced them. The 2021 incorporation used a registered agent in Georgetown, who also serves as agent for 9 other entities, 2 of which trace directly to the Jong organization's North American operations. I found the connection in 14 months with no organizational access and a laptop. I keep my voice level. The DEA Financial Crimes Unit found it in 11, with subpoena power and 17 analysts. Your shell companies are already flagged in their documentation. When Park Sung-jin goes down, he goes down alone, because the Jongs will not absorb your liability. They never planned to. You were always an expendable asset to them, someone to use until using you became expensive. The specific silence of a calculating man encountering a calculation he didn't make. You're bluffing, he says. I'm a forensic accountant who has spent 4 years building an airtight case to find the man who killed my daughter's father. I don't bluff. I meet his eyes. I document. He moves. Fast. 12 years in physical security means he knows how to close distance. My body makes the decision before my brain finalizes the memo. I step into the movement instead of away from it inside his reach and bring my elbow up hard into his throat. Not lethal, intended to create the specific sound that brings the 2 men day-ho positioned in the birds of paradise 30 seconds after Park arrived. It does. They come through the doorway with the efficiency of people who have been waiting for a precise signal, and Park Sung-jin, hand at his throat, managing the physical reality and the revised strategic situation simultaneously, makes a decision I watch forming on his face a half second before he acts on it. "Don't," I say. He stops. There's evidence in 6 encrypted locations on a timer. If I don't enter a code in the next 2 hours, it releases automatically to the DEA Financial Crimes Unit and to every media contact I've cultivated in 4 years of working adjacent to federal investigations. You will not get ahead of it. The only offer you had was to cooperate with Shin Dae-ho, and you spent that offer trying to threaten me. I step back. So now you have nothing. The Sajangnam's men are going to take you somewhere. I would recommend honesty as your only remaining currency. Park Sung-jin looks at me with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he believed he understood about variables that were supposed to be manageable. The boss appears in the doorway. He looks at Park for a long moment with the flat, total assessment of a man who has completed his grieving and arrived somewhere permanent. He walks forward, stops. Father and surrogate son. 12 years of shared table and shared work and shared loss between them, and now the specific, irreversible knowledge of what that 12 years actually was. "My son called you Hyungnam," he says. "He trusted you." Park says nothing. So did I. Daeho's voice doesn't rise. It never needs to. I will honor my code, even now, even for this. You'll speak to my lawyer. Everything you know, everything you've documented. In exchange, your family is untouched. That's the offer. A pause. Once. Park closes his eyes, opens them, nods. A small, compressed motion, the last sovereign gesture of a man ceding the field. "Gaja," says Dae-ho, and his men take Park through the door. The Jiang organization moves an hour later. The dead man switch Park had constructed, exactly as I'd calculated. 4 cars, 11 men. They come for the Silver Lake safe house because Park's contingency named it as Simone Carter's location, and Simone Carter is the one person who can tie their shell companies to a hit on Mulholland Drive 5 years ago. They don't find Simone Carter at the Silver Lake safe house the way they expect to find her. I have 90 minutes between Park's removal and their arrival. I use them. I don't barricade or hide. I reposition, which is different. I study the house's layout the way I studied the media division's financial records years ago, systematically, looking for what the structure reveals about its vulnerabilities and where leverage points exist. The kitchen faces north. The primary approach road curves from the northwest. The birds of paradise on the east wall are dense enough to conceal 2 people at the base. The interior hallway has 2 sightlines and 1 blind corner. I move the decoy devices, improvised from electronics in the safe house, charged and active, transmitting the same signal pattern as occupied rooms, to the 3 positions most likely to draw immediate attention. I set up at the kitchen counter with my phone open on an encrypted live link to the DEA contact I've spent 14 months cultivating, and I text Dae-ho the second signal. "Company coming. I have eyes." He arrives with 4 men 7 minutes before the jongs do. He sees what I've done to the room and says nothing, just takes the position I've left open near the hallway and nods once. "North entrance," I say, watching the security feed on my phone. 2 vehicles, 4 or 5 each. They'll come through the gate. It's faster and they'll want fast because they think surprise is their advantage. He relays this in rapid Korean. The diamond formation reshapes itself around the architecture I've mapped. The jongs come through the gate. They find the geometry. The confrontation is 4 minutes and 40 seconds of controlled violence that I navigate by reading the sounds rather than watching the action. The specific acoustics of professional engagement in a confined space, punctuated by the silence that follows each resolved vector of threat. Nobody dies. The boss's instructions clearly communicated, contained, a message rather than elimination. When the Jiang leader is zip-tied to a kitchen chair, surrounded by the financial documentation I've laid out on the table, his own exposed, his own shell companies reflected back at him, he looks up at me with an expression I recognize from forensic work, the look of a man who has just understood the architecture of what was built against him and cannot find a seam to argue with. "You built this in 4 years," he says. 14 months of active documentation. The foundation took longer. And you brought it to him. His eyes move to Daeho, knowing what he'd do. I brought it to the person with the greatest motivation to act on it, I say. That's the first principle of forensic work. Evidence belongs to whoever has the standing to use it. He looks at the documents again. What do you want? My daughters to be safe. The man who killed their father to face consequences, and for your organization to understand that the evidence exists in multiple locations beyond anyone's reach, and that any future pressure on the Shin family, or on me and my children, triggers its full release. I fold my hands. That's everything. He considers this the way all calculating men consider positions they have no leverage to improve. Agreed, he says. The next morning, the boss drives me to Forest Lawn, not the SUV convoy, a single car, himself at the wheel, which I suspect required significant reassurance from his people before they permitted it. Mia and Sua are in the back seat in their burgundy coats, debating with quiet intensity whether white chrysanthemums are better than yellow ones, whether the yellow ones are cheerful or whether cheerful is wrong for a grave, whether their daddy would have an opinion on this. Sua argues with the methodical precision of someone who has decided the answer is knowable if you think about it hard enough. Mia's position is that yellow is underrated, and the world should acknowledge this. I listen to them and feel something I haven't felt in 5 years, something adjacent to peace. We walk to the grave together, all 4 of us, which is a sentence I've rehearsed in private iterations for years without expecting to ever speak it aloud. Daeho crouches to the girl's level. At 61, with the old break in his hand and the specific weight of the last 48 hours, it costs him something visible. He does it anyway. Your father, he says carefully, was the best thing I ever made. Better than I deserved. He looks at Sua. Her composure, her stillness, the specific intelligence in her eyes that is entirely her father's. I see him in you. Sua considers this the way she considers all serious things, quietly, from multiple angles. Mommy sees him in me, too, she says. She says it makes her happy and sad at the same time. Yes. He places his hand gently over the cold stone. That's the correct description. Mia lays her flowers. Sua lays hers with both hands, pressing each stem into the earth the way she has done every year of her life. Daeho places the single chrysanthemum, the one Sua gave him at this same grave yesterday, which he has carried through everything that followed, which tells me something about him that no financial document could. And he stays crouched with his palm flat on the headstone for a moment that none of us interrupt. Then he stands and he looks at me over the girls' heads in the October morning light. Stay, he says. Not in the organization. Not at risk. In the house adjacent to mine in the hills, where my people can protect you and the girls, and where Mia and Sua can know their grandfather. He pauses. I am asking, not requiring. I know the difference, I say. Do you have conditions? Several. Tell me. I continue my own work, my own clients, my own income. I am not employed by or beholden to the organization. If I see something that concerns me, I tell you directly. Not through intermediaries, not through Park Sung-jin's replacement. Directly, always. I hold his gaze steady, and if I ever decide the arrangement is no longer safe for my daughters, we leave, without argument. He doesn't hesitate, not for a single second. Agreed. And you tell me the truth, whatever it costs. I don't look away. Jaewon kept things from me to protect me. and he died for it. I won't live inside that architecture again. If there is danger, I need to know it. If there is a choice to be made, I make it with the full information, not after. Deho looks at me for a long moment. The hillside morning light makes his silver hair look like a choice, rather than a consequence. He has the particular stillness of a man who has spent 48 hours being broken apart and has not yet decided exactly what shape to reassemble himself into, but who understands clearly that the shape needs to be different from what came before. "He was right about you," he says finally. "Which part?" "All of it." A beat. "He wrote me a letter. In the last month before he died. He never sent it. I found it in his apartment after, hidden inside a book I gave him when he was 12. His jaw tightens, then releases. He said he'd met someone who saw the world the way it actually is, not the way people want it to appear. He said she made him feel like being honest was possible. He pauses. He said he was going to introduce her to me when he'd resolved the thing he was afraid of, when it was safe. I don't speak. There's nothing to say to that. There's only the October hillside and the white chrysanthemums and the two small girls who are Jaewon's entire legacy, alive and arguing about flowers in the morning light. Mia takes his hand. She does it the way 5-year-olds do, without announcement, simply and completely, as if she has always done it. He looks down at her small fingers wrapped around his, and something in his face does the thing I saw at the graveyard 2 days ago, the total, involuntary dissolution of every constructed defense, the thing that happens to a person when they encounter something irreplaceable and understand it for what it is. Sua takes his other hand. "Come on, Harabeoji," she says, getting close enough to the word that it lands. "Grandfather." His breath catches. Then he lets them lead him down the hill, both small hands holding his large ones, and he does not look back. I follow them. In the October morning, watching the three of them move ahead of me through the headstones and the chrysanthemum smell and the LA skyline hazy behind the hills, I understand something I've been calculating around for 5 years without seeing it directly. I stayed. Every year, every careful visit, every archived document and encrypted backup and timed release protocol. I built an architecture not just for justice but for return. I kept the math clean because I was always intending to solve for something more than safety. Jaewon said, "You disappear when you need to and see everything while you're gone." I was never gone. I just needed the right equation to come home to. 3 weeks later, the Jong organization's primary financial network becomes the subject of a DEA investigation that the Los Angeles Times describes as the most comprehensive forensic case against a West Coast criminal organization in 14 years. My name appears in no public documentation. The compound in the hills has a guest house adjacent to the main building, and my daughters have colonized it with the speed exclusive to 5-year-olds and weather systems. Daeho has a standing Tuesday morning appointment at the kitchen table where Sue-ah explains her current ongoing analysis of various topics, and he listens with the focused respect of a man who understands that intelligence, at any age, in any form, deserves to be taken seriously. Mia has started calling him Harabeoji, properly now. I am working at the same kitchen table one Thursday evening when Daeho comes in, sets a cup of barley tea beside me without being asked, and says, "I heard from a contact in Vancouver." I look up. The Jong family has a cousin who operates independently on the West Coast. He's been asking questions about the Silver Lake incident. His voice is level, the way it always is when what he's saying costs something. About you specifically, about the documentation you hold. I fold my hands on the table. Outside, my daughters are in the garden. Sue is showing Mia the caterpillar she has been monitoring for 3 days, narrating its progress with scientific seriousness. The October air moves through the window, smelling like chrysanthemums and cold stone, and a future that isn't finished yet. "Tell me what you know," I say. He sits down across from me, pours his own tea. meets my eyes, and tells me the truth? If you've ever held a secret for 5 years because you loved someone too much to risk what the truth might cost, and then watch that secret walk out of your hands in the form of 2 small girls with white flowers, tell me, would you have brought them to the grave? Would you have stepped forward when he turned around? Because I made that choice without knowing whether he was the answer or the danger, and everything after was the consequence of it. Shin Dae-ho says, "She saw what no one else saw, and she waited until the proof was unbreakable. That's why she's still here." I don't know yet if the cousin in Vancouver is curiosity or a countdown, but I know what I'm building toward. I always know what I'm building toward,